before you scroll away, let me ask you something most people are afraid to confront. What if the very thing you've been taught to fear, being alone as a man, is actually the reason you've never discovered your real power? What if the absence of a girlfriend is not a failure, but a test? Because the truth is, the world is full of men who are surrounded by people and still completely lost, and very few men who are alone and truly in control of their lives. Nobody warns you about this phase. They just label it loneliness, weakness, or something that needs to be fixed quickly. So men rush, they attach, they settle, they trade their peace for attention and call it love. But the man who resists this pressure, the man who stays alone long enough to hear his own thoughts, enters a psychological territory most men never reach. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is not a motivational fairy tale. This is about why emotionally independent men are the hardest to manipulate, the hardest to replace, and the hardest to forget. It's about why some men walk away from chaos without regret, why silence no longer scares them, and why their presence alone changes the dynamic in any room they enter. If you've ever felt judged for being single, questioned for not chasing relationships, or pressured to prove your worth through someone else, then this message is not random. It's necessary, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been told about love, masculinity, and success. And by the end of this video, you will either return to old habits, or you will realize you've been standing at the edge of a transformation without recognizing it. So stay, listen carefully, not because this will entertain you, but because this might be the conversation that finally changes how you see yourself. And once that happens, there is no going back. When we talk about a man who lives alone without a girlfriend, the first misunderstanding we must destroy is the idea that he is lonely. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it is the absence of direction. A man surrounded by attention but lacking purpose is far more lost than a man sitting alone in a quiet room with a clear sense of where he is going. Solitude, when chosen consciously, is not emptiness, it is structure, it is alignment. It is the space where a man finally hears his own thoughts without interference. Most men have never truly been alone. They move from distraction to distraction, friends, relationships, social media, constant noise, because silence exposes something they are not ready to confront. Silence asks uncomfortable questions. Who are you without approval? What do you stand for when no one is watching? What is your value when no one is choosing you? The man who lives alone without a girlfriend has decided to face these questions directly instead of outsourcing his self-worth to someone else. This is where self-direction begins. When a man is not emotionally tethered to someone else's expectations, moods, or needs, his energy returns to him. He starts waking up with intention rather than reaction. His routines are no longer built around pleasing or impressing, but around progress. He learns to manage his time, his impulses, his habits. And over time, this creates something extremely rare in today's world, a man who governs himself. Psychologically, this matters more than people realize. Dependence weakens the nervous system. When a man needs constant reassurance, constant affection, constant presence to feel stable, his mind becomes reactive. He is easily disturbed, easily distracted, easily controlled. But solitude, especially romantic solitude, forces emotional regulation. A man learns to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. He learns that feelings rise and fall without destroying him. That boredom doesn't kill him. That desire doesn't have to be obeyed instantly. This internal mastery is the foundation of confidence. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, grounded kind that doesn't seek applause. And this is why self-directed men move differently. They don't rush. They don't panic. They don't attach their identity to being wanted. Their sense of worth comes from competence, consistency, and self-respect. They know how much effort it took to build themselves, and they are not willing to trade that stability for temporary comfort. Philosophically, This man understands something most people avoid, that love is not meant to rescue you from yourself. It is meant to complement a life already in motion. When a man uses a relationship to escape his own lack of direction, he doesn't become fulfilled. He becomes dependent, and dependence always turns into resentment, control, or fear of loss. The man who lives alone without a girlfriend is protecting himself from this trap. He is choosing to become whole first. This does not mean he is closed off, cold, or anti-relationship. It means he is selective. He refuses to build his identity around another person. He refuses to borrow meaning instead of creating it. And because of that, when he does eventually allow someone into his life, he doesn't bring neediness, chaos, or emotional hunger. He brings stability, presence, choice. And here is the paradox that shocks people: the more complete a man becomes on his own, the less he needs to prove anything. He doesn't need to announce his independence. It is felt in the way he speaks, in the way he listens, in the way he walks away from what does not align. This is not arrogance. This is inner order. So if you are a man living alone without a girlfriend, understand this phase is not a pause in your life. It is preparation. You are not missing out. You are building in silence what others will spend years trying to repair in chaos. Use this time to sharpen your mind, discipline your body, and clarify your values. Because a man who can direct himself will never be lost in the crowd. Remember this and carry it with you. When you stop chasing validation and start building direction, your life stops drifting and starts moving forward with force. When a man lives alone without a girlfriend, something unavoidable happens. There is no one left to carry his emotional weight, no one to absorb his stress, excuse his shortcomings, or soften the consequences of his decisions. And this is exactly where real strength is built. Responsibility stops being a concept and becomes a daily practice. Every outcome in his life, good or bad, points back to him. That level of accountability is uncomfortable, but it is also transformative. Most people avoid responsibility not because it is difficult, but because it exposes the truth. When things go wrong and there is no one else to blame, a man is forced to confront his habits, his discipline, and his standards. Living alone removes the luxury of emotional outsourcing. There is no partner to regulate his moods, motivate his routines, or rescue him from his own lack of structure. If his life is chaotic, it is clearly his doing. If his life improves, the credit is undeniably his. This clarity sharpens the mind. Psychologically, this creates resilience. A man who must manage his own inner world learns emotional containment. He learns to feel anger without exploding, sadness without collapsing, and pressure without escaping. He develops the capacity to hold discomfort long enough to understand it. This is not suppression. It is integration. He is no longer a slave to every impulse or emotion that passes through him. He becomes stable, and stability is the root of authority over oneself and eventually over one's environment. Failure hits differently when you are alone. There is no comforting narrative offered by someone else, no immediate reassurance to dull the sting. Failure becomes instructional instead of personal. A man begins to analyze rather than dramatize. What went wrong? What pattern keeps repeating? What skill is missing? This shift from emotional reaction to strategic reflection is a sign of maturity. It is how men stop repeating the same mistakes under different circumstances. Living alone also exposes weakness in a way group life never does. Procrastination, inconsistency, poor self-care, wasted time. These things become impossible to hide. There is no audience to perform competence for. The mirror is honest. And while this honesty can initially feel brutal, it is the only environment where genuine growth occurs. You cannot fix what you keep hiding. Responsibility strips away illusion and replaces it with precision. Philosophically, this is where a man learns ownership of his life. Not entitlement, not expectation, but ownership. He understands that no one owes him fulfillment, motivation, or meaning. These are things he must create. This realization is heavy, but it is also liberating. Once a man accepts that his life is entirely his responsibility, he stops waiting, he stops complaining, he stops negotiating with reality. He starts acting. This is why men who have lived alone for a meaningful period develop a different relationship with effort. They respect it. They know progress is slow, unglamorous, and repetitive. They learn to show up even when there is no praise, no witness, no reward. This builds a quiet confidence that cannot be shaken by rejection or delayed results. When life tests them, they don't collapse, they adapt. And this strength changes how a man approaches relationships later. He does not look for someone to save him from his problems. He looks for someone who can walk beside him without carrying his load. He doesn't confuse love with relief. He understands that partnership is not about reducing responsibility, but about sharing life from a place of individual wholeness. Many men fear being alone because they confuse responsibility with punishment, but responsibility is not a burden when it is chosen. It is a source of dignity. A man who carries his own weight walks differently. He speaks differently. He expects more from himself and less from others, and this makes him impossible to manipulate and difficult to replace. So if you are in this phase, living alone, handling everything yourself, do not rush to escape it. Do not numb it. Do not distract yourself from it. Use it. Let responsibility refine you instead of resenting it. Because the man who can take full ownership of his life becomes someone others can rely on, but never control. And remember this as you move forward: the moment you stop avoiding responsibility and start embracing it, you stop being a passenger in your life and become its architect. When a man becomes emotionally independent, something subtle but profound shifts in how he exists in the world. He stops moving from need and starts moving from choice. And this is where he becomes both uncontrollable and unmistakably attractive, not in a superficial sense, but at a psychological level that people feel before they understand it. Emotional independence is not coldness. It is not detachment. It is the ability to stand firmly within yourself without needing another person to stabilize your identity. Most emotional manipulation works on one weakness need. When a man needs approval, affection, validation, or constant reassurance, he becomes predictable. Predictability makes control easy. His moods depend on how he is treated. His self-worth rises and falls with attention. His decisions become reactive. But when a man no longer needs emotional permission to feel okay, the leverage disappears. You cannot threaten to leave someone who is already whole on his own. Psychologically, emotional independence means a man has learned to self-soothe. He can regulate his emotions without outsourcing that responsibility to a partner. If something upsets him, he processes it instead of demanding instant comfort. If he feels desire, he doesn't confuse it with urgency. If he feels attachment forming, he observes it rather than surrendering to it blindly. This internal discipline creates calm, and calm is power. People often misunderstand attraction. They think it is created by doing more, giving more, proving more. In reality, deep attraction is created by stability. A man who is emotionally independent does not chase, not because he is playing games, but because he is not anxious about outcomes. He is present, attentive and engaged, but never desperate. That absence of desperation is felt immediately. It signals value, it signals abundance. It signals that his life does not collapse if someone walks away. And this is what makes him uncontrollable. You cannot rush him with ultimatums. You cannot guilt him into sacrificing his standards. You cannot manipulate him with silence or affection. He listens, he considers, and then he decides. His center does not move easily. This does not make him rigid. It makes him grounded. He is open to connection, but not at the cost of self-respect. Philosophically, this man understands a critical truth: attachment without autonomy is not love, it is fear. When two people come together because they are afraid to be alone, the relationship becomes a negotiation of insecurities. Control replaces trust. Testing replaces communication. But when a man is emotionally independent, he does not enter relationships to be completed. He enters to share what he has already built. This is why his presence feels different. He is not trying to impress. He is not trying to secure. He is not trying to lock someone in. He allows others to be themselves because he is not terrified of losing them. Ironically, this freedom creates deeper bonds. People relax around him. They feel chosen rather than needed, and being chosen is far more powerful than being required. Emotionally independent men also leave differently. They do not threaten departure to gain compliance, and when they do walk away, they do so cleanly. No drama, no revenge, no begging. Just clarity. This teaches a painful but valuable lesson to those around them. Access to a grounded man is a privilege, not a right. This level of independence does not come from ego. It comes from doing the inner work, from sitting alone long enough to understand your fears instead of projecting them, from building a life that does not revolve around emotional consumption, from learning that solitude can be peaceful rather than punishing. Only then does a man stop clinging and start choosing. And here is the part most people don't like to hear. Emotional independence is rare because it requires restraint. It requires saying no when attention is available, but alignment is missing. It requires tolerating loneliness instead of escaping into the wrong connection. But the reward is immense. A man who cannot be controlled cannot be reduced. He cannot be trapped in roles that do not fit him. So if you are walking this path, understand what you are becoming. You are not distant. You are disciplined. You are not hard to love. You are simply no longer available for emotional chaos. Remember this and act on it. The moment you stop needing to be chosen, you become someone others cannot forget. When a man has learned to stand alone, something fundamental changes in how he approaches love. He no longer reaches for relationships as an escape from emptiness, boredom, or fear. He reaches from a place of stability. This distinction is everything. Most relationships fail not because of lack of attraction, but because they are built on emotional survival rather than conscious choice. A man who has not learned to be alone enters love asking to be saved. A man who has learned solitude enters love asking to share. When a man is alone long enough to build himself, he stops romanticizing relationships as solutions. He understands that love does not fix a broken identity or compensate for a lack of direction. This awareness makes him selective, not cynical. He does not fall in love with potential. He observes patterns. He listens to behavior more than words. He understands that chemistry without character is chaos and affection without respect is erosion. Psychologically, this man is no longer driven by fear of loss. Fear is what makes people tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, and emotional instability. Fear is what makes them negotiate their boundaries. But a man who has survived his own solitude knows that being alone is not the worst outcome. Losing himself is. So when he enters a relationship, he does so with clear internal rules. Peace is non-negotiable. Respect is required. Growth is expected. This is where his standards become visible. Not standards written on paper, but standards enforced through action. He does not argue excessively. He does not threaten. He does not beg. He simply withdraws from what does not align. This is not punishment. It is self-respect in motion, and self-respect is deeply attractive, even when it is uncomfortable for others to face. Philosophically, this man understands that love is not possession, it is presence. He does not try to control outcomes or guarantee permanence. He allows the relationship to exist as long as it remains healthy. This makes his love feel free rather than heavy. He does not trap people with obligation. He invites them with consistency. And because he is not trying to extract value from the relationship, he brings value naturally. This kind of man does not confuse intensity with intimacy. He understands that emotional volatility is often mistaken for passion, when in reality it is unresolved insecurity colliding with attachment. He chooses calm over chaos, depth over drama, alignment over obsession, and this choice protects both him and the person he is with. When conflict arises, he does not collapse or dominate. He communicates clearly. He listens without defensiveness, and if the issue reveals a fundamental mismatch in values, he does not cling in denial. He accepts reality early, rather than dragging pain across time. This is emotional maturity. It does not come from books or advice. It comes from having nothing to prove and nothing to lose except integrity. A man who stands alone also understands timing. He does not rush commitment to fill silence. He does not delay commitment out of fear. He moves when alignment is present, when trust is built, when mutual effort is visible. This makes his commitment meaningful. When he chooses fully. And because his life is already structured, his presence in a relationship feels safe rather than consuming. This is why such a man is difficult to replace, not because he is perfect, but because he is whole. He does not ask his partner to complete him. He asks them to meet him. And meeting a grounded man requires accountability. It requires emotional honesty. Not everyone is prepared for that. And he accepts this without resentment. So if you have learned to stand alone, protect that strength. Do not abandon it the moment affection appears. Let love be an addition, not a substitution. Let companionship enhance your life, not define it. Because the strongest relationships are not formed by two people who fear being alone, but by two individuals who choose each other without fear. Remember this and carry it forward. When you stop using love to escape yourself and start using it to express who you are, you don't just find a relationship, you build one that can last.